Hey everyone, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host, Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
Objectively, Evan.
Okay, we'll go with that. Objectively, Evan. So today, as we're talking about something that's really exciting in terms of we've seen a lot of this kind of building momentum in the community, not just our local community, but kind of the global old world community. Kind of last year, building some steam, and going into this year, we're going to talk about objective based scenarios
Yeah.
and how we see this being a really positive influence on the community in the future and such. And I definitely want to give Evan here a chance to talk about kind of our thought process, our reasons, the idea behind it. He was kind of the mastermind in constructing the core foundation of what we were doing here. And I think a big goal for us is last year we did try some of these in different events in RTTs and such, but the community just wasn't ready, right? A lot of the people were even this year. We still have new players joining,
Yeah.
people collecting their army, people still learning the rules, right? People building up their models, right? Hobby takes time, right? For
Yeah.
people to get ramped up. So people just weren't ready last year. And just playing pitched battle for 3 rounds was great. And they had fun. Of course, we started spicing it up, especially at our 2-day events with more things. But as we're seeing the meta start to, ebbs and flows, kind of shifts. We're definitely seeing some more dominant, very meta killy builds or
Yeah.
very meta points denial builds, and that's a fine way to play a game. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, we're also certainly noticing in our community, right? There are definitely some really skilled players who are masters at this game and know how to do that. But the vast majority of people just showing up to events are just there to hang out with their friends. They just have a great time rolling dice and play like a whole bunch of games back to back, right, without being interrupted. And so we're looking for really trying to promote through our community, through our events, this objective based scenarios that we feel really gives more impetus to the infantry builds, more to that balanced list. Again, you can still build a very killy list. That's totally fine. So, and we've had a few events with it so far. Really excited about the results. So that's kind of the starting point. But Evan,
Yeah.
why don't you take us through your journey?
So the way I see it is that having something that, like, if you have no objective, then the kill points incentivizes you to say, my army is the other player's win condition. So how can I manipulate my army to be as difficult to beat as possible? And that's a lot easier to do actually than to actually build an army that can beat any army. So it's much easier to lock yourself down into a little brick that's impossible to penetrate so that the other person gets to
Hmm.
have no fun whatsoever, just so that you don't give
Hmm.
up any points. And this line of reasoning leads us to a lot of the builds that are very popular in the kill point meta right now because, simply put, you just don't get to defeat anything and you just get no points. And honestly, the way I see it is that that's fine that that line of reasoning exists and that line of logic is not to be shunned or to be seen as an incorrect thing to do. And you can try to clamp down on this with all kinds of different comp restrictions. But again, that only exists because that's the only objective on the table. So if there are alternative ways to get points on the table, then first of all, building your entire army just to deny points to your enemy isn't necessarily the best play. You could do other things too. And secondly,
Hmm.
this is going to engage a lot of people onto a physical location on the map where now you and I are locked in a dance of how can we get there, right? So the whole point of this is potentially to kind of manipulate the army construction situation to make it a little bit less pivoted towards everything either needs to kill everything in the universe, like a Pegasus Knight unit, for example, or be
Hmm.
completely unkillable, like a unit of 200 skeletons, right?
Yeah,
So,
or another way is also again points denial or the run and flee strategy, right?
yeah,
Or you're really manipulating the system to give up as few points as possible. So really, not only is this trying to create other objectives to bring the super killy meta high list down a little bit, but also looking for opportunities to bring some of the infantry and more fun, exciting things that look like an army more a little up a little bit more, but not doing it through a forced requirement, by
yeah,
doing this through incentivization through our events. That again, we're not trying to rebalance the game, we're trying to create scenarios, which again the community generally does not want homebrew rules, does not want you to rebalance the game. They just want, but they're very on top of, hey, I'm going to this event has these scenarios and missions, and they're very embracing of that, which is great because we get to try about lots of stuff. But I think a key word there is also engagement. That was a
yeah,
big thing too,
engagement.
very much making a game or scenarios where players are clearly motivated for win conditions that you need to engage with the enemy army, not just whittle something down and go hide in a corner. Because honestly, winning by 100 points is not that hard. And we saw a lot of players would, I snag my 100 points and then I run away, I won the game. And that's not the kind of behavior, that's not it's an effective behavior, right? But
Yeah.
it's not maximizing the fun that we want both players to be doing. That's really what we want to do at our events is both players, we want to maximize the amount of fun they're going to have during that game.
Yeah, and you know what? Just getting to actually roll and get to do some wounds and remove some models feels good. And
Hmm.
I think that these scenarios incentivize you to bring more units that are potentially a little bit easier to kill because some of the units that you're going to bring are worth sacrificing. Just, I'm going to bring this unit, they're going to run forward, they're going to grab the objective for a single turn, and then they're going to die. That's fine. Because
Hmm.
if they're worth less than how much the objective gives you for a single turn of holding it, then worthy sacrifice, right? And so then you don't have to be, oh, I'm going to clutch my pearls with every last point of every last unit so that you can't get anything from me because guess what? Now your units are actively winning you points in a way that isn't just do they run down the enemy 100%, right? And what this does is it means all of the units that are in the middle of that curve between being completely unkillable and to being incredibly high damage, those middle units have something to actually do.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely, which is exciting. So we've
Yeah.
talked about kind of the high level goals a bit.
Yeah.
Evan, why don't we actually dive into again? This is kind of our round two. A big thing with us at Old World Legends is that we run our events every month throughout the year, in particular. And what we do is we're testing out our scenarios. At one event, 1 month, and then we get feedback survey. We tweak and adjust for the next month. We do that 3 times, which
Yeah.
then leads into what are the scenarios we're going to play at our 2 day events at our GT events. So you're seeing actually the second iteration here. Evan's already gone through the first iteration, and we could go through. It's just about a page and a half, really simple to grok, and Evan can explain to you not only how does this work, but why we think this is motivating players to
Right.
have a much more fun game with their opponent. And we have actually seen the results where the killing lists are still wiping out their opponent, but we're seeing the lists that are not nearly as killy are absolutely competing with them, and sometimes they're getting their really losing on the kill points, but they're able to overtake their opponent on the victory points by enough that they're still winning some of those games that they had no hope of winning before. Versus like, what do I do versus Pegasus Knights? I can't kill them. What do I do versus the dragons? Well, the answer doesn't have to be you have to kill them or run away from them now. There is a third option. So really exciting. We've seen some really positive results. So Evan, take us through it.
Okay, so first of all, the different scenarios are basically going to have objective markers on different parts of the battlefield. In general, there's kind of ones closer to your own deployment, closer to the enemy. And what you need, though, is you need to have a unit that has a standard bearer and a unit strength of 5 or more to be able to contest an objective. So what this means is that you need to have multiple units in your army that are going to bring banners, and then they have a capture power that's equal to essentially their rank bonus and their banners added together, which is really simple and easy to remember because that's pretty much how combat resolution works. So
Hmm.
everyone has it immediately on their mind. How do I do ranks? How do I do that? And you have a lot of mechanics in the game that interact with and benefit from things like rank bonus, whether you can get flanked or if you're in specific type of terrain that you lose it. So this just naturally fits in with the objective scoring that we're going to have, right?
Hmm.
So the reason and the motivation behind this is that I find that I see a lot of competitive lists that are going pure kill points have no banners or even any ranked up units at all. See a lot of
Yep.
armies that are I have 7 units of skirmishers, 3 monsters, and a wizard.
Hmm.
That's not an
Yep.
army. That's like a boy band.
Yeah, and that's yeah, definitely seeing more of that. Those really premium lists that people are really starting to refine the meta and really starting to find the most effective things. And unfortunately, that's leading them towards again skirmish based play, not necessarily old world army based play. So the great news is since we've run this at 2 events, we've seen a lot more of that army based play start to come back on the battlefield and start to be more effective, which is really exciting.
Yeah. So that's also why for example, in order to be able to contest objective, you have to not be fleeing, and you have to have not be flying, and you have to be within the 4 inches. So 4 inches seems like it's not a lot, but because your unit is often a big brick of dudes, you can be an 8 inch wide unit of rangers that's got 16 models, eight wide by 2 deep, and you're just barely within 4 inches of the objective, and you're good. You're holding it now, so
Hmm.
you're fine. And that
Yeah.
means you have a lot of freedom for where your units can be, and it just ties you down slightly to being close to a specific spot on the battlefield that you're guaranteeing, I'm going to try to defend this spot, or you have to try to take it from me. The other thing that this
Yeah.
4 inch range does is that the enemy needs to move within 4 inches of it to be able to contest, which means, guess what? The perimeter of the bubble is 8 inches across. How far can infantry charge? Generally more than 8 inches. So this means that if
Right.
you have an infantry unit that's holding an objective and somebody else moves into a control range, that infantry unit is going to be able to charge whoever just did that. So if they have,
Yep.
Knights of the Realm or something like that, they can't just sit 17 inches away and wait to just charge you from in a one big long bomb that you can't possibly react to. Guess what? If you're holding the objective, they're going to have to get close to you or let you, keep scoring over and over, right?
Yep. Now we did originally start with 6 inches away, but
Yeah.
that actually was causing problems, and we revised it to 4 inches, as Evan was just explaining some of those reasons. We found that this is much more effective for that sweet spot. We found that 6 inches where units, everybody was just towing in, and they were not getting close enough to really get that threat of that engagement to engagement going. So we realized we needed to bring it in a little bit closer.
Yeah. So generally, there's about 3 or 4 objectives on the table, and a unit can't control more than one objective. Even if you are 30-inch wide goblin unit all in a single line, you can only
And you're
hold one
like, who would
objective.
possibly do that? I'm
Everyone
telling you,
would always do
we
that.
put these rules out. I had at least 4 people immediately ask me if they could do that. So yes, there's a reason why this rule exists.
Yeah, so there's definitely a couple of kind of bookkeeping things in here just to make it so that you don't have these situations that make no sense whatsoever come up on the table. But after, so I played 6 games across the 2 RTTs, and I've played about a dozen practice games with these kind of rules.
Hmm.
We have refined and we've found some of those edge cases and just weed them out. For example, the no standards or thematic army restriction. So if you're either playing Troll Horde or maybe as the Wood Elf, all tree, tree spirit army, you don't have any
Hmm.
banners at all. And I don't want to
Not really.
discourage people from bringing these armies that are very thematic and aren't necessarily even the strongest thing that you can bring. So if you do
They're not.
that, you can have 2 core and 1 special unit count as scoring units, and their capture power equals their rank bonus. So you still have to actually have like a unit that's not in skirmish and has like a decent number of models in it to have ranks to capture. So you can have a unit of like 20 dryads, and they can all rank up and have some capture power there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, the big thing there is it's not that it's super effective. It's not supposed to be. It's just that we didn't want to create scenarios or a rule set that was just discouraging players from fielding really cool, fun thematic lists. So that's why those rules exist. And again, if you want to play Troll Horde and you want to be really thematic and just go with all trolls, you absolutely can, and you can still compete just as well. Maybe not as well, but you could still definitely compete in these scenarios. Or you're like, you know what? I'd actually rather take some goblins with my Troll Horde with some standards, and that's fine too. So
Yeah.
again, we wanted to make sure there were choices so that we were not doing the opposite while we were trying to bring the meta highs in a little bit and the meta lows up a little bit. We didn't want to make existing army lists not viable at all. That is very much not our intent. Our goal is what is the fewest things we can change to maximize the fun that players are having.
So objectives are controlled by units that have capture power rating of 1 or higher, and then you add the units that are within range of an objective together to get your capture power score of each objective. Then whichever player has more on that specific objective, holds it. So this means that if you have, a single unit with 1 banner and they've all been wiped out, so there's only like 6 guys left, that's only capture power 1. And even if that unit is sitting right in the middle of the objective, if someone else has moved in, let's say 2 or 3 units and they've got some ranks in there, they have more capture power than you, so they get to say, I hold that one now. And this actually
Hmm.
leads to some really interesting play where you tend to actually want bigger infantry units now. So you want to have a couple rank bonuses there, or you have, a unit of the cavalry where they've got, they still have to have at least unit strength 5, so they have to have a couple models in there. So you can
Hmm.
see more medium-sized units instead of just Death Star or MSU as being the only viable picks. I, for example, often slot in 20 High Elf Spearmen into my list just so I have some guys who are relatively cheap and can be pushed onto the objective, and they can actually just use some spears to fight off a similar type of unit, like Men at Arms, for example. So
Hmm.
this is the kind of play that you actually get to see when you have these objectives, because if you want to bring these units, now they don't have to kill 200 points worth of enemies to be worth bringing 200 points of High Elf Spearmen. They just have to be worth a unit is going to have a decent chance of sitting on the objective and earning me the victory points from the objective, right?
Yeah, and we don't have the victory points. The actual amount of victory points that we award for each round for holding the objectives, we're actually it is relative to the scenario. So
Yeah,
within an RTT, there will be three scenarios. They could all potentially be different, but
yeah,
in short, it's at least mentioning that last year we tried again earlier versions of this when the community wasn't quite ready. And the biggest thing we found, if you only give away like 100 victory points, 200 victory points, you think like, oh, that's a lot. The reality is it wasn't enough to motivate anybody. Everybody just said, that's not worth me sacrificing a unit or engaging with the enemy or having to put my neck out there. I'd rather just play my conservative game and ignore that whatsoever. So we did find that really, again, we're still balancing this and going through iterations, but each player turn that you're scoring these, you need to be scoring at, we're finding it so far, the community is resonating with, it needs to be 300 to 400 plus points scoring per round to motivate players to play this type of gameplay. If it's not that many points, players aren't engaging with it. So this goes back to Evan's high health example. Well, I don't want to sacrifice my health. Well, if I had to sacrifice my health unit because there's a dragon on the other side and I only got 100 points and they cost me 100 points or they cost me 150 points, why would I
right.
do that? But if I'm sacrificing a 100 or 150 point unit and I get 400 victory points out of it, and they were never going to score 400 victory points killing anything else on the table anyway, suddenly this is a huge win. And that's going to make it a lot harder for that dragon to, if the dragon comes in and kills you, that dragon's not scoring that objective and they're not scoring 400 points. So suddenly it's a massive delta and it really creates some fun, exciting scenarios.
Yeah, and it basically lets you put pressure. So if you want to bring a full infantry, rank and flank list, you can put pressure on your opponent to say, look, I've got the objectives now. So each turn until you've killed me, I'm going to start scoring points. So the other person,
Mm-hmm.
if they've got a monster mash, kill points focused list, they now have to figure out how can I efficiently chew through the enemy before they've scored so many points from the objectives that they're going to win still, right? So it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
just come down to you kill me or I kill you. It comes down to you kill me or I hold the field, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So there's
just love
two
it.
levels of play, and both of them can be balanced or focused on in your army list construction. You can focus on killing points, you can focus on holding
Mm-hmm.
objectives, or you can try to go in the middle, which is what I generally try to do. And all of those
Mm-hmm.
builds we've seen be successful. The people who take the most competitive list with just a couple banners in there, they're successful. People who take several horde units that have some banners in there, but then also just crap loads of infantry, and you just have 200 men at arms on the field, they've been successful too. And so you let these multiple different ways to play engage with each other and create a lot of exciting gameplay. And you know what I've seen a lot of infantry on the table recently. A lot of people are bringing out
Yeah.
the big bricks, and I love it. I see that a lot.
I think
And it's
I think one of the
yeah,
most important things you said there, Evan. We're finding that sweet spot where this is
mm-hmm,
creating more list opportunities rather than this really isn't removing that top tier ultra killing meta list. Those things still exist, but this is allowing a whole bunch of other lists that could never compete with that meta list suddenly have a chance to compete with it. So we're actually seeing more list variety, not less.
yeah. So we did skip over just one thing here. We score at the end of your player turn. Now, what this means is that at the end of your own turn, if you hold more objectives than the other player, so it basically, if there's three of them and you hold two out of the three, then you get the victory points for that round. But you don't score on the other person's turn. So you have a
Mhm.
maximum number of times you can score in the game, which is five because you don't score on turn one. And so then from turn two, three, four, five, and six, those 5 times you can potentially score that one time only bonus. And occasionally you'll score on your own turn two, and your opponent will score on their turn two. Because by the end
Mhm.
of their turn, maybe they've taken that objective back from you. Right?
Yep. And we originally, and the first time we did this, we did score just at the end of the round, and we actually found that was not working well. It was creating too much of an advantage to going second. And also in Old World versus 40K, your units aren't nearly as maneuverable.
Yeah.
So we actually found it was significantly more detrimental. So we did this, we made this change last time where you just score your victory points if you've achieved it on your player turn, starting on turn two going forward. And we found this was significantly more successful, and players were really happy with that tweak.
Yeah, my original intention with the end of the round was first of all, it's really simple. So it would just be, hey, we finished the round. What happened? Right? And then the second intention was to try to alleviate the advantage that normally you have going first. Because going first can
Yeah.
be a big advantage. If I go first, I got 3 cannons, and I just wipe out half your army with that. I mean, that can be a pretty big feel bad. And so feeling like, okay, we can give an advantage to someone to go second, it's great. But I think it's just the advantage was a little bit too strong. So maybe
Hmm.
there's ways to tweak that in the future. So maybe have a half measure or something like that. But at the moment, scoring at the end of your own turn feels really really good because guess what? You get to cast your enchantments. You get to say, okay, I'm going to do this charge, and I'm going to charge my dragon princess into those goblins that are on the objective. So they either
Hmm.
have to flee, in which case they don't score anymore, or I'll charge into them, and then we see, hey, maybe they fall back, maybe they give ground or something, and if whatever happens, maybe I get to take the objective from them because of that charge, and now boom, I got the points, right?
Yep, it's
So,
working really well.
and you feel like I on my turn actively moved a bunch of things around to pick up a bunch of points, and now it's up to the other person. What are they going to do? Or do they have a counter move to that? Do they have another unit that's going to charge into me? Do I have to flee now? Who knows? And that's what that we'll see happening, and you have this really cool back and forth. The other thing that happens is that you have people who are just a lot of scoring units, and they just push up onto them and then wait, and they say, "All right, I'm sitting on them.
Yeah,
What are you going to do?"
yeah.
And it presents
They're
the other
like,
person
come
with
get
this
some.
option of like, "What am I going to do?" Right?
Uh-huh.
But
It creates that pressure, but that's what we
yeah,
want, right? The whole point is you're fighting over this battlefield, right? And it's just drives engagement between both armies, both players rolling more dice, both armies more models dying is just more fun. Everybody's having more fun.
yeah. It's definitely changed my list building a lot. I like taking a lot more template weapons. Okay, because first of all, like Fiery Convocation, that spell, if you cast that and you roll the hit marker on some like clan rats, oh boy. I cast
Yeah.
Fiery Convocation on a unit of 19 zombies, and I
Ooh.
killed 15 of them.
Okay, that's brutal. Not going to happen now. Still, that was not a lot of points, but still, I bet it felt really exciting when it happened.
Super exciting. But also Empire Mortars or a Dwarf Flame Cannon, these have a place on the battlefield, especially because guess what? You know where the enemy's going to have to go. So you can put your
Hmm.
flame cannon somewhere where it'll be perfectly within range to drop big flame templates down on anyone who sits on, let's say, like a midline objective. Because guess what? The objectives are kind of equal spaced to each player. So there's generally at least
Yep.
one that's kind of 24 inches from the table edge, so it'll be exactly on that midline position, which means if you have a 24-inch range volley gun, you can have it pretty far back in your deployment zone and still nail anybody who tries to get on that specific objective.
Yeah, it creates a lot of interesting scenarios, and we're definitely seeing because this is giving significantly more value, points value, battlefield strategy value to infantry, even if they're not
Yeah.
about killing the opposing army. They have a very meaningful role, and absolutely can be the difference of you winning games. And then now you're incentivized to take these bigger bricks, and now all of a sudden template weapons, which we've seen very little of in this edition, are starting to make their way back in. So there's just we're really excited for this, and we're hoping that other communities are also seeing the same results because we know there are other communities out there doing their versions of it. We're having a blast with our version of these rules, and hopefully GW in the future also starts incorporating more of this into the core rule set as well.
So just let's go through the last couple of rules before I talk a bit more about the kind of the methodology behind this. So if you have a battle standard bearer, the current thing we tried out is that if you have a draw on your command capture power rating for the two teams, if you have a battle standard bearer in range, you break the tie. That's pretty
Hmm.
cool. It means that bringing your battle standard bearer to a list, especially if you have an elite army, can be really useful because you might not have units that have horde, you might not have a whole bunch of ranks, so you're gonna have to bring more smaller units and maybe at the BSB to help break that tie, right? Um, then if you have in order to maintain control, you have to have a unit next to it for the whole game. So if you have an objective that's right on the end of your deployment zone, you're going to have a unit of like archers or handgunners or something like that to sit in the back and just capture it and stay on it, because otherwise you'll move away and you won't control it anymore. So planning for having some kind of little unit of shooters that just sits there is actually pretty interesting and brings more value to those kind of units. Like for example, an unit of 10 Empire handgunners, worthless. At least compared to a Hellblaster for the number of points, terrible. But now I need them, right? Because I gotta have a banner sitting on my backline objective from somebody, and if I don't do that,
Hmm.
then I'm gonna have some Empire Knights that are just hanging out in the back. I don't want to do that. So this
Hmm.
is helps provide more exciting and more interesting situations. And the where the objectives are on the table comes with a specific kind of a theme and a vibe from the scenario. You'll see that in a minute as well. And then the other last thing here is that we don't score on turn one. So it'd be a little bit too strong if, for example, if the first turn of the first player, I just run up the field, sit on the objective, and immediately get the score. That doesn't feel right. So we start scoring on turn two and onwards.
Hmm. Yep, and just some armies are inherently, of course, a lot faster than some armies are slower, right? You know, elves to dwarves is the classic comparison. So, again, through trial and error last year and the last two events, it was very clear that scoring starting on turn two feels a lot better. So that's kind of our core rules as they stand today. And but again, every month we're running our events, both in person and our online events, and we're always collecting feedback from players and learning new things. And I expect these to evolve. But beyond those core rules, which is a great foundation, let's talk about some of the scenarios that we've run. Actually, this first one is just a pitch battle,
Yeah.
Evan.
Oh,
I
I
think
was
we
going to bring it up though that what we did at this time around is that first thing in the morning people are a little rusty. Some people haven't played in like a month or so before they come to the event. Some people. One person I played against in my first game, he said he hadn't played in like 6 months, and that was his. It
hmm
was just the first game. So one of the things we did to try to make it a little bit easier to just ease into the day is that the first round of the day is just a kill points only objective, situation. So just play something nice and simple with a little bit of like there's an ambush. You can have a couple extra units in ambush here, so make something a little bit different. But you can just still have objectives in your plan for the tournament. But you don't have to be
hmm
the only thing. So we just have a kill points
hmm
mission to get the day started off with. And also this helps with the kind of the pairings. So if you pair into someone who doesn't quite match your level of skill, because it'll just be random for that first round, this one won't be worth quite as many battle points because it's harder to get the kill points up to the limit that we changed it to so that it works for the objectives. So
Yep.
these rounds tended to be more like a 13-7 or a 12-8 kind of thing, even if you really kick the crap out of your opponent.
And that'd be the same as whether we're doing a one-day event or a two-day event. Typically, we like to start with a simple pitched battle, wake players up, and shake off that rust. Because again, some players like Evan are playing significantly all the time, almost every week. But the vast majority of the community doesn't. Right? They play once or twice a month, sometimes not even that. So, but they still love to come to events. Again, the focus is the goal is to have a great weekend, rolling
Right.
dice and hanging out with your friends. That's the point, right? So it's really great to just, oh yeah, what were my rules again? Let me wake up. Okay, now after lunch and we all had a good laugh. Now game two and three. Now let's get to some more exciting rules with our objectives.
All right, so the first objective mission we played on this day, right after lunch, was Flank Assault. So the theme of this idea is supposed to be that there's these two massive armies, not just the ones you brought to the table, but kind of extending outwards, are fighting on this big open plain, and these are the far right and left flanks, respectively, of those armies, trying to kind of get around each other and beat each other to start turning and rolling up the flank of the whole army. So this is why we deploy only up on this like left-hand side, from this player's perspective, of the table, because that's basically the end of the line, and they're trying to kind of race around the corner and turn the corner on the enemy. We put each of these gold symbols here is an objective, so we have 3 of them here, and now you can see one of them is right at the end of your deployment zone, so you can basically just deploy units right there to hold it. And the idea behind this is so that you have to try to flank the enemy, but not without sacrificing defending your own lines, right? So you need
hmm
to kind of potentially go to this one that's kind of equidistant between 2 enemies here on the right hand side. That will be something that is really hotly debated the whole game, while simultaneously defending your own home base. Or if the other person isn't defending their base very much at all, you can ignore the flank and just kind of run straight into their lines and take these 2 that are on the left hand side. So if you think about it from the perspective of all I need to do is get 2 out of the 3, which 2
hmm
do you want to go for? And remember, one of them's
Yep.
in your deployment, so really, which one of the 2 do you want to go for?
Yep, you don't need all 3, but of course, as you're deploying your army 1 unit at a time, your opponent is deploying their army 1 unit at a time. So a lot more fun strategy that when you're doing your deployment, it's not just about where am I positioning to kill the enemy or to conserve points or to avoid charges or make charges. Now it's what is my strategy for how I'm going to tackle these objectives, and it just adds that additional layer that just makes it that much more fun.
Right, and remember, the whole point of this is to make different types of army style and different types of units that you might want to bring more exciting. Ambushers, way more exciting. If you have little ambushers that show up back here and start trying to fight my high elf archers who are sitting on this objective, guess what?
hmm
They have a decent shot of fighting back, but it could go in any which way. We could just fail my break check and you just run them down, and now you've taken the objective from me. What happened in
Oh
my
yeah.
game? In game 2, is I played against Jonathan's Night Goblins. He had a massive number of random movers, and I was just like, oh, that's scary. And what happened was he ran all of these mangler squigs, squig hoppers, and stuff like that at me, and I was just shooting at him and getting run down by all this stuff. But guess what? None of them had banners. So he was able to kill all the stuff that was trying to defend this objective over here, but he didn't capture it himself because those units couldn't score. In the meantime, he had
Hmm.
3 units of night goblins. One of them was kind of sitting in the back with its bows, defending this objective on the left hand side, near his deployment zone, while the other two were trying to push up towards the one in the middle, which is where my dragon and my white lions were fighting him out. But because I was playing Trace, I deployed my difficult terrain piece, which I used a little camp with some tents, right on this objective, and which meant that any of his warband units that went onto the objective or got anywhere near scoring range were going to have no rank bonuses. Because difficult ground disrupts your rank bonus. So
Yeah,
it actually
to
made
your
it a
point,
fair fight.
it was back to like, hey, typically you want to have, your big bricks going for the one or two objectives or whatever, or in your backfield you would have, that 10-man archer unit or that 10-man rifle unit, which we're definitely see a lot of people doing that because again they're trying to maximize how many soldiers or the bigger bricks they can put on the front line where they believe the contestant is going to be and keep the back lines typically more, less defended. And this is where again those 5-man, 10-man, or skirmishing, ambushing units that typically couldn't take on the big bricks or couldn't take on the cavalry, or in a lot of games don't necessarily have a purpose to serve. Suddenly now they can pose a huge threat to a backline unit that's holding an objective.
Absolutely. And then you know what happened was really interesting is that we fought a lot over the middle one where we each held the one in our objective zones for a while. And then later on in the game, he was able to kill my units off of the one on the left hand side. So then even if I held the one in the middle here, kind of on the right hand side, I wouldn't score more than him because I only had one and he had one. Right? So he was able to
Hmm.
deny me from scoring just by killing the units off on the left. So there's a lot of interplay here, and it just leaves you open ended to get to interact with your opponent with the units you feel like bringing. And I feel like that's really fun.
So let's share the last one that we had, and then let's wrap this one up because we got other episodes to jump to.
All right, so the last one is called Border Dispute, and this is a slight tweak from what we did last time. Last time they were kind of all straight down the center line, and on this time around we kind of offset them a little bit so that some of them are closer to your deployment, and then the other one is kind of closer to your enemy. And this gives you
Hmm.
the general vibe of essentially that you're trying to fight over like a border between two kingdoms or two rival factions. And the idea is that if you try to take that middle mid ground, that you've kind of pushed the enemy back and you claim, even if it's just a few inches of ground, that you've kind of pushed the enemy back and you've held the middle. So we've put them down here in the middle. And when I played this, I was playing against a high elf player or an empire player with a lot of artillery and some knights. And what ended
Hmm.
up happening was I was able to just kind of fight through into the middle of the table and use my longbows to keep his knights at bay, and my Walk Between Worlds Shadow Warriors were just like unchargeable. And in the
Hmm.
meantime, he did 7 wounds to my dragon, so he had to go hide. But it was a really interesting game. He ended up doing more kill points than me, but I had all the scoring from the objective, so I was able to win the game that way. So that's just a good, goes to show you, how you can play these games in a more interesting way. And my advice to my opponent was, hey, maybe next time bring some state troops, because a lot of my things that I was bringing wouldn't necessarily be able to beat, 40 state troops if they're trying to contest the objective from me.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. All right, so that's kind of the high level. That's not necessarily every possible strategy, and that we couldn't possibly cover them all today. But I think the main thing is we're really excited about objective-based scenarios. We really do feel this is kind of the heart and soul of the old world. It doesn't remove kill points. Kill points are still very critical, still very important to part of the game. Certainly not removing them. We got whole big sheets for them. But we're really excited to see the evolution here. We've only done two main events this year with objective-based scenarios. We're going to keep doing more, and we're going to keep learning more as we take
Right.
communities. And we'll probably do another catch-up on this topic, maybe later in this year, and tell people where we at once we've learned a lot more.
All right, just real fast, I want to talk about the scoring. So we change, and it sounds like a lot, but you can get up to 400 victory points for every turn that you have more objective than your opponent at the end of your own turn. So that's 2,000 in a game if you got it for 5 straight turns in a row, right? Which is very hard to do.
Which is very hard to do.
It's well, the only way you're going to do it is if the opponent has like no scoring units or they already died by then, right? And so
Yeah.
because of this, we need to update the victory points differential from being kind of like 200 per tier that kind of go up from the battle points to 300 per tier. And this helps
Hmm.
alleviate the fact that you're going to have potentially 4,000 points worth of victory points that you could earn if you kill the other person and score the objectives every turn. That
Hmm.
doesn't tend to happen. What often happens is that with fairly
No.
balanced opponents, that they'll have a pretty close kill point game, maybe by 400 or 500 points swing one way or the other, and then the objectives can usually be the tiebreaker at that point. So if maybe somebody is only up by a little bit on the kill points, then the objectives will tie break and kind of scoot them over the other side.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. So I think we'll wrap this one up. Again, please do like, share, and subscribe. We hope you enjoy this content. Please tell us if you've been using your own objective based scenarios, what you've experienced in your community. Or again, if you're looking for copies of this, we're happy to join our Discord and share them with everybody out there. Because again, our goal is to grow the old world community.
Yeah,
Evan,
absolutely.
any last words?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that this is all based on my Gleaming Pennant rules that I wrote for the old world, and I have shared that on
Mhm.
Reddit a few times, and I've been refining it. So hopefully we'll have a new version out for everyone to see pretty soon.
All right. Awesome. We'll see you all next time. Bye.